Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and we have Gerald Clark with us again. I've had literally hundreds of requests to get Gerald back on the show. It's been way too long. He's had several programs going on where he's actually working on his own film, his own TV series, and he's got this software that he's putting it together with kind of as a rough draft, and I just think it's incredible what he's doing. Now, The Seventh Planet, Mercury Rising, is one of my favorite books. Also, The Anunnaki of Nibiru, he's author of both of these, and fortunately, I actually have signed copies. But you guys, we're going to get really deep today into Enlil, Enki, the agenda. We're going to connect a lot of dots, and this is going to get deep. We're actually going to go further than we've ever gone before, and we're going to bring out some just very intense information. So if you're not ready to have some paradigm shattered, I would maybe recommend stepping away from this podcast, because the stuff we're going to talk about, if you are of specific religious beliefs or if you've been raised a certain way, it's going to shake you a little bit. And you know, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing on your path, we're certainly not here to change who you are. This is just some information that's been suppressed for so long. And people usually hear about the history of the victors. Think about that for a minute. The history that we learn about is from the victors, which means, hey, maybe that information from the past, the natives, what people would consider shamans or very powerful people of antiquity, their information has been suppressed because it could be very valuable for evolution of consciousness. So not your Darwin evolution, talking about spiritual rising. I am really excited to speak with you, Gerald. It's been way too long. Thank you for joining us here at Leak Project. And just to confirm, ladies and gentlemen, I had to try and keep up with Gerald here with the hair because, so we've got Ozzy Stern in the flesh. Actually, it's possessing the Rex Bear archetype right now, and we're trying to keep up with Gerald's hair here. What's going on, buddy? It's been way too long.
Not much. Actually, we did just catch up on a show, what was it, 2 days ago or yesterday with Jay? So
yes.
So it must be time for us to talk again. It has been a while, and we've been off doing our own thing, right? So, but you have some questions that came up that sounds like now's the time to bring them to the surface if you're all about them.
It really needs to be.
Me, I generally don't touch things on the surface. I like deep, but I can be goofy too sometimes. Your glasses are on crooked there, by the way.
There's, that's actually supposed to be that way because there's these X-ray laser beams that have actually started to come out of my eyes because I actually just did, went to the WIP facility out there in New Mexico and absorbed some of that radiation. And people think that plutonium's actually bad for you, but what it does is it helps with superpowers. And Marvel was correct.
You've got quite a glow. It's a nice look on you.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's wonderful. I don't even need a flashlight anymore, even though I do have one of the best in the industry. This bad boy right here. That was my shameless plug. That's a one-tack. Okay, I'm sorry. We're digressing. People are going to shut off.
Good you had those glasses on because, that radiation coming out of your eyes would be causing a bloom effect in my software right now. So it's good.
It's intense. It really is. I mean, that's why we need supercomputers now, ladies and gentlemen, is to jump off into the quantum fields. But literally, if you go back into, let's jump into the Old Testament. Let's talk about Yahweh. Let's talk about how I feel Yaldabaoth in the Gnostic text is Yahweh. And I used to kind of put more, how do I put this? More energy than maybe I should into the archons that were discussed in the secret book of John. I look at that more now as very symbolic.
Give you a closure real quick. The gas truck just showed up, and they climb on my roof right here, and they make a bunch of noise. Can you hear that right now, or are
we're fine? It's okay. Yeah.
If it gets bad, that's what's going on. We'll put it on pause, okay?
It'll be the archons. We'll just blame it on them. Okay, we'll put it on pause.
Yeah. So you have, in my opinion, accurately identified Yahweh, who, if you go way back in the literature, including the Poimander from Hermes, they identify the being who's basically the commander on Earth that's running the hologram like was done in Battlefield Earth, right? John Travolta played the character who was the Demiurgus from the Anunnaki who was running stuff, okay? And treated humans like dirt, right? Well, Enlil is the Demiurgus when you finally connect all the dots. And he was known as Yahweh in the Levant. And some people say, well, that name isn't real. It was a tetragrammaton aggregation of 4 different symbols. Okay, well, that may be the case, but His name is listed right beside Yahweh's name in the Lamentations of Ur, which was a city that his son Nannar occupied in the second dynasty. Okay, so the connections are very, very clear. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was none other than Enlil Yahweh. And by the way, Mauro Bellino at the Vatican completely agrees with my writings of that in his book. So, and I think many other people see that as well. And it makes sense. He was the highest ranking one on Earth on the Anunnaki Council, the rank of 50, and he was the commander as designated. It's in the literature. So it makes sense that he would be the one basically making the final decisions on what slave implements are used to keep the humans under control. What do you think? Are you with me, Rex?
Absolutely. And I'm thinking about the information that Mauro talked about when we did that podcast a while ago, and he totally confirmed what you said, what you've wrote about, and this isn't a Zecharia Sitchin confirmation either. And that's another thing that I really want to talk to you about is the information that you've obtained that confirm these bloodlines and these names, specifically going all the way back to Enki and Enlil. You talked about the Oxford University, different writings of antiquity, that if you could give the specific name so people...
Let's just kind of go at this logically. So you hear about, there might be, wow, they're on the roof now, really making some noise.
No
you
problem.
Hear about the ancient astronauts that supposedly influenced the Sumerians. So you go back and look at their records. They say the Anunnaki were their gods and they made them and they served them and had no problem with it, okay? So as you go further back in time, I lost the track of what the first point was. You wanted to know about how do we get back to Enki and Enlil, right?
Exactly.
So
let's go to the very beginning.
Yeah. So in that process of looking at the Sumerian literature, there's tens of thousands of tablets. Okay, so you're overwhelmed, don't know really where to start. So you kind of focus in on the ones that involve kings and gods because they tell the best story, right? There's all kinds of literature on marriage contracts and you name it, they had it written in wet clay that they dried, okay? I mean, everything, laws, all kinds of stuff. But the stuff that was focused on telling the story of the kings, like what shows up in the Sumerian kings list, and affiliated stories about what happened to each dynasty. Well, this one ruled, and then now it's gone. And in the merry-go-round history of the Sumerian cities. Well, when you dig into that and find out who the players are, there's only three major stories that you need to see that bring those to light. And in the order of priority in which I add credence, going back to the University of Oxford and their records, especially the work done by Stephanie Dawley and her crew. Okay, not that I'm looking to circumvent any work done by Zecharia Sitchin, but I realized he stepped into a quagmire. And, the chopping axe was at the roots of his translation. And that's what always happens in these circumstances. So I didn't want to get mired down in that. So I went directly to the digital sources that were transcribed by digitization, okay? And we have a cuneiform script, uniform code that's published. You can download it to your computer that tells you what every single cuneiform symbol is. Okay, it's a symbol library. Okay, if you have that, you can read this yourself. Okay, so that said, three major documents come to the surface because they list all the major players that were showing up on the Anunnaki Council. Okay, and that's really where you want to look, is who was marionetting this whole thing, who was in charge, whose mission was this, and everyone else is just an actor on a scene, as far as I'm concerned. So I started there. The Atrahasis was number one for me. That one, I think every human should read. And it's 11 tablets, and it's not that long. But it basically lists some of the major characters, who did what to who, and it tells the story of the human creation account, which everybody wants to know. So that one was key for me, number one. Number two was, and actually depending on the degree of a scientist you are, number one might have been the Enuma Elish for you, was how did the universe and our solar system come into being according to their writings. Okay, so Atrahasis and Enuma Elish were 1 and 2 and interchangeable with me. But the Atrahasis trumped that if you were worried about where did I come from and where am I going. Okay, well, and then number 3 I mention oftentimes is the Epic of Gilgamesh, because Gilgamesh was the king of the city of Uruk, which is very close to the city of Ur, which is mentioned in the Lamentations. And there were temples there that were dedicated to some of these beings, including Anu, Inanna, and others that were mentioned in this host of characters that we put together on a genealogy table. And I know you've got a genealogy table I sent to you, Rex.
I do. Yeah, it's actually, I've got
don't like the level of detail. But as an engineer, when I started seeing all these names from those 3 accounts, I started drawing flow diagrams. Well, who's the son of who? And would they have affinity for that agenda because they're of that bloodline, blah, blah, blah. And it started coming together, right? Well, Enki and Enlil are at the very highest portion of that genealogy table. And you can see mine in the background here too as well on my wall. Okay. Mm-hmm. So right up near the top, you had Anu and his wife Antu that spawned these 2 critters. Anu and Antu had Enki, and Anu and his sister Ki Arash, which is his half-sister, birthed Enlil. So Enlil was the one in line based on their hierarchy of inheritance to be the commander, even on Nibiru. Okay? So when he landed on the earth with Enki, those 2 had major problems. Enki being the firstborn and already there established the mission for a very long time. And Enlil showing up going, hey, yo, I may be younger, but I'm in charge and I'm the commander. And they had problems from the very beginning because of that. Probably had problems way back on Nibiru as well over that same issue, birthright issues. So that kind of puts some of the key players of the Anunnaki Council out on the table that show up in the Atrahasis, the Enuma Elish, and the Epic of Gilgamesh. And through that synthesis of those documents, you'll see that they went by other names, depending on which culture they were in. You with me?
I am.
So I went on a monologue there, and I got us back to the connection to Enki and Enlil. So what are your questions about these guys?
So, I mean, I've seen the film Jupiter Ascending, which reminds me of this because, and it's got this intergalactic war going on where there's these aristocrats that are literally, they've got deeds of planets, and Earth is one of those deeds. And at the very top level of this extraterrestrial race is a what looks like a white male. You know, I mean, it's a white guy. It's not a reptilian.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not.
I liked it, and actually there was a lot of truth I think got spilled in that movie.
That's why I'm bringing it up, is because I was going to ask you about that. Do you think that might be representing Enlil in a sense, or something in reference to that?
Well, you have to go, if you go back to the Enuma Elish and look at the planets that were assigned to the Anunnaki, of the 12 planets that they had listed, Nibiru being the 12th one, Jupiter was Enlil's planet. So,
let me jump in. I got to ask.
Another name for him was Thor. Okay, so when you see Marvel portraying this supposed being carrying a hammer that's there to protect humanity, that's just the opposite of what the truth is. That's just the opposite, and that's
Thor is Enlil.
Thor is Enlil. Valiant Thor was the one that showed up in the White House. Remember?
Yeah, absolutely. From Venus, supposedly.
Look up Valiant Thor on the internet. Listen, he's been here in the United States since the end of World War II, running stuff, whether you like it or not. Okay? These were the tall whites that Paul Hellyer pointed out occupying Indian Springs since the end of World War II that came over with Paperclip Project. Same ones. It's Enlil's clan.
Well, I mean, are there tall whites with Enki also? I mean, maybe the tall whites.
Yeah, well, yeah, they were all tall, and and the avatars that they happened to choose per culture, they could change them. Okay. Well, it looks like in Sumer they were, you know, kind of tall, light skinned with the reddish hair. You've seen the bodies from Iran that were in stasis, right? I think they look.
Do you think the cone heads are the Anunnaki?
Huh?
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think that the elongated skulls that have been found with the red hair, like a lot of stuff that L.A. Marzulli, you know, you can call them the Nephilim?
Yeah, I think they're either the Gigi or they're actually some of the Anunnaki themselves. And I think the Gigi were a subrace of the Anunnaki. Definitely.
You know, because I look at some of these petroglyphs and these Sumerian tablets and then the archetypes that are put together, and you'll see these very tall people, and then underneath them you'll see like the Egyptian slave workers, which I'm thinking to myself, okay, are these the humans that they're portraying? That's kind of what's going through my mind. And let's get into this for a minute. You know, if the pyramids were created by the Anunnaki, if these ancient structures that they're finding,
let's talk about that point real quick, because this keeps coming up, and I want to put my 2 cents in on what the literature says about construction of the Giza pyramid. Okay, this is not me saying it. This is what's coming from the literature. Okay, the same literature that told you about these lower dimensional beings that came into our dimension and are occupying bodies of high authority, just like in the movie They Live. Okay, I know this is coming up. It came up on Alex Jones with Joe Rogan. It's come up multiple times. The fact that this is happening and it's tied to child sacrifice with Pizzagate, now you understand, okay, this is not coming from humans. This is an alien thing that's being done to harvest humans. Okay, and I don't want to get off track on that, but they're very much connected.
You know, I remember watching a movie called Cabin in the Woods, and I would strongly recommend anybody that has a chance to listen to this podcast watch the film, because it starts off and you think it's going to be a cheesy horror flick, but then come to find out the entire agenda. It literally has alphabet agencies and these underground networks that are connected to this energy force, and there's these sacrifices that have to take place at a certain time. If these sacrifices don't take place, then the entire system collapses. And I'm not going to give away the entire story, but it's really good, and just the symbology behind it, it makes you realize that you go back to the sacrifices that you hear about, the blood rituals and the bloodlettings all the way back thousands of years. Well, maybe that stuff is still going on now. And you know what? I'm not going to say who, but I talked to somebody.
Well, let me just lay.
Real quick. I just want to say this before I forget, because I'm on a roll here. Or at least I'm on a roll in my own mind. There was a gentleman that I spoke to the other day, very good person, good soul. He's a Native American. He's got some very powerful ties. And he was talking about how he sees these different prophecies, and as far as with this specific situation in North Dakota and the pipeline that's going on, he feels that there's these rituals being played out to kind of get that into the hands of the people that profit off of all the petroleum. And he told me about these specific sacrifices that take place in like, for example, if there's a football event going on underneath the stadium, when everybody's above roaring and getting excited about the football game going on, well, maybe there's something sinister like that going on underneath. He told me that, and he didn't give me any specifics, but he said that kind of stuff goes on, and I have no way to clarify that or prove that. It just makes you wonder and think about, my goodness, man, if that kind of stuff is still going on, and they're using those sports and those touchdowns and those specific time frames and the numbers and everything all connected, it really kind of makes you think that there are these entities and archetypes at higher levels that could be doing this intergalactic chess match, kind of like the Masonic symbols are showing the black and white checkerboard, and you've so eloquently put it all together with all the names and stuff. And I just wanted to add that, and I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, yeah, this is it's kind of a tangent off of the Enki and Enlil clan battles and what's going on. But it is connected, and I want to share with you how the Anunnaki, in my opinion, are connected to the lower dimensional beings that were brought here during the time of Atlantis. Okay, it was described that beings, humans, the Anunnaki's offspring that were occupying Atlantis with them, were power hungry, and they wanted the same kind of potential, clearly, that these higher dimensional beings had, and they did some sort of ritual that involved blood and the rites that were read, as according to Thoth. Well, that combination of using the blood and the rites is what allowed them to come forth into this dimension. Well, it turns out the really crazy part is the chemicals that they cause to occur in human blood by torture or extreme experience are exactly what they need. And it looks like adrenaline or noradrenaline or some sort of cortisone that happens during the fight or flight experience, and it seems to be elicited quite easily in children, okay? And they're not polluted with the food and the poisons that we're intentionally getting all through our lives, right? So the kids are a perfect target for them. That blood essence is critical to allowing them to stay in this dimension, okay? So the fact that they're occupying the bodies of high authorities, just like Thoth said, he said they got rid of them for a while, but they would be back. Well, look around you, and you tell me that the attributes of the bodies that are being animated by them, and I'm talking pedophilia, non-human characteristics when it comes to negotiating obvious things like nuclear waste and atomic warfare, they are not on the human frequency. You can see that. And now it all makes sense to me that that stuff they talked about in the movie They Live, this is really evidence that they have really done that. And there is a dark, light war, just like you said, with the checkerboard floor from the Masons that's going on for control of these meat hosts in terms of our hive evolution to a higher consciousness. Some want us to evolve and some don't. And they're part of the alignment with the Anunnaki that were I would say, aligned with the Demiurgus, okay? The one that's trying to keep the holographic system in check so that the matrix doesn't get reloaded. That one uses these lower dimensional beings to proxy war, occupy the bodies of the high authority, because he's like, hey, it wasn't me, it was them, right? Same thing we did in Syria, same thing do in Iraq. The Anunnaki use proxy wars, and we're the pawns. And the host for their parasitic energies that they can bring from other dimensions if they want. Not all of them are like that. The Anunnaki are at war, like you said. There are those on the sides of the clan that are aligned with darkness, and they're using humans for absolute fodder, and they have been for a very long time. Then there's a force that, like with Enki and Ninmah and Ningshita, the three that actually had an involvement in creating us in the Outer Haces, they appear to be trying to intercede on our behalf. If you're watching and you're looking, okay? For instance, why is Ninmah ISIS being smeared with barbarians under the Muslim flag? Who is Allah, okay? But you go back in the record, you find out this was one of Enlil's son, Nanar Sin, who was Allah. Okay, so they're all involved in this big marionetting game going on.
How far back does that go?
What's that?
Time frame. What would be the time frame of that?
Allah, his name shows up in the Outer Haces. Okay, that document I told you about, he was the rebel god, and you have to now look at him and go, was he a hero that had the Gigi miners rise up against Enlil's authority, surrounded his fortress at the Eker Temple? That's where the humans came in, where the Anunnaki said, hey, we got to do something about this uprising. We need a replacement worker. That's where you and I came in. Okay, so Nanar Allah was part of causing that to happen. And he paid severely for it later in time. If you read the Lamentations of Ur, where he and his wife, the queen Ningal, were in the city of Ur when Enlil got agreement from the council, including his father Anu, to nuke the place while they were all there. Payback for leading a rebel miner that messed up his gold acquisition plans as the Demiurgus commander. That's what's going on. Absolutely.
Now,
so all the religions that are tied in with the Abrahamic religion are under the thumb and the auspices of the control of Enlil, and they always have been. And I'm going to further add insult to injury while I'm talking about religion. If you're doing any rites that involve ritual with blood, you have opened yourself up to the Demiurgus portal so that you can be occupied by his proxy agents from a lower dimension. Welcome to his world, because he will chew you up and spit you out, just like any parasitic host will. Don't do it. Don't do it. I made you sneeze, sorry.
That's okay.
And your eyes watered.
Let me ask you this about the blood.
That's the hard news that nobody wants to hear, but that's what's going on.
Let me ask you this about the blood rituals and stuff, because I've oftentimes wondered about the Christian sacrificing, or not Christian sacrificing, but they're drinking the blood of Christ and they're eating the flesh, you know, and then you've got this whole archetype of God gives his son to be sacrificed for the sins of humans, and supposedly we have free will, yet if we act upon free will and don't follow certain dogmatic agendas according to specific rituals and rites and philosophies and spiritual beliefs, then you're not going to go to a certain heaven, and you're going to have to go spend time in eternal damnation. And you can do anything you want in some of these religions if at the very end you just say, please forgive me so that I can go to heaven. So it just seems like all of this mind control, programming, and it seems like they're like, do as we say, not as we do, because Jesus says it's okay, because this is all through Jesus. And you know, if you just start to ask yourself these questions, it's like, why?
Well, you opened up a can of worms there. You opened up a real can of worms there, because when you really dig in and find out which of the Anunnaki were trying to help us and which of them were looking to use us as fodder, parasitic hosts, and expendable miners, one of them that comes up that had his direct hands on our genes was Enki's son, Ningshita. He was the one that carried the caduceus, right? The intertwined serpents going around a pole. And he carried it all through many cultures, including through Greece and Rome, where he was known as Hermes and Mercury, right? That's why I put him on the front of my book. Hold my book up, okay? That's why he's my hero, because he stuck his damn neck out for the humans that have been enslaved, try to help you. Okay, and he gives you the secrets of how to get out of the Demiurgus system if you want to. You don't have to. You can stay here and get marionetted all you want, but he gives you the way out. And this is knowledge that penetrates all space and time. It's immortal, eternal knowledge when you read his words, and the spark is in you to receive them. It's very powerful. But he's the real deal for me. So.
It's interesting because I would like to talk more about Thoth or Toth. There's people refer to him with different sounds, but certainly if you look at the history that's available in certain literature, he seems to be a very kind archetype. I mean, he brings knowledge, he brings numbers, he brings math, he brings magic, and essentially magic in and of itself, in my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, if you refer to something as magic, do you breathe? That's magic. You thinking something in your mind is going to cause a specific reaction. Just the imagination of itself has a huge impact on magic. So just being alive in and of itself, I think, is magical and beautiful and wonderful. And so many people have these different interpretations. Oh, well, magic, that's from Satan. That's from Lucifer. No, it's whatever you want it to be. What is your thought process? What are you doing in daily life? And we have so many opportunities when you read about all these things that we are supposedly not supposed to do, like, for example, mental abilities, like being able to see with the third eye and stuff like that. This guy came on the show the other day and left a comment on the channel saying that the third eye was the stink eye. So if you open your third eye, you got to get anally butt humped. And I was like, see what I mean? It's people like this guy. They're just have no clue and throw people way off. And it was kind of funny. I made a joke about it on the comment section, and thinking about it is that it is funny that people think that way. You know what I mean? I mean, yes, there is sexual practices out there where people do that kind of stuff, and I get it. But that is not the third eye. The third eye is the pineal gland, and that's why there's so much fluoride in the water. That's why there's so many additives in the food. There's so much hocus pocus, magic used against you, ladies and gentlemen, to imprison you in your own minds and your own meat suits.
Yeah, there's different teachings about the chakras, and people can look into that. The pituitary gland is right between your eyes. The pineal gland is recessed on the top, which is your crown chakra. But the real point about that is I want to bring up is, and I'm giving credence to Thoth again, who supposedly wrote over 35,000 books himself. Okay, we only have some of them, but in one of them he talks about in his tablets, he talks about, if you want to understand the truth of reality, then learn to distinguish matter from energy. And in particular, he was talking about you. Distinguish your energy from matter. Well, where are the energy points in our body? We can see brain waves. We can read heartbeat pulses in like 60 beats a minute, whatever. We can sense the different frequencies of the human body. But when you go to actually down to the point where light is interacting with your DNA through the chakras and creating different color wavelengths, to me, that's like the bomb. And I know you've looked at Kirlian photography and things like that. I did too, and that was really curious to me, is how much truth is there about a human being, some mixture between energy and matter, and what does it look like? How does it, which one has precedence? Is it the energy or the matter? And I looked into this in my structure practice for almost 10 years, correlating structural changes in the human body relative to gravity with what it was doing visually with energy. And I did this in frequency and with light. And after a while, I was like, yeah, as an electrical engineer, I'm like, yeah, I get that. The structure's deviated right here. The energy along the paraspinal, or along the spinal conductor, gets impeded. There's no cerebral spinal fluid flow like it should be from here to here. Nerve ganglia are pinched because of the transverse process of the vertebral spine. I get it, okay? The chakra shuts down there, okay? So whenever your structure is damaged, your energy is not optimal, okay? That's what I found out. I wrote an equation based on that, okay? So this is, to me, it's just science. For people hearing about the energy body for the first time and all this esoteric stuff and how it ties to other dimensions, they're like, dude, get grounded, have some coffee and relax because you're out in space. But the reality is, this is the truth of our holographic reality. And it's weirder than science fiction. The truth of the nature of the physics of our reality is bizarre. So when you get good with that, some of this other stuff may not be so fanciful to you.
Where do you think we are right now in this global chess match, intergalactic battle? And do you feel that it's going to be in perpetuity? And I'll ask more questions after that.
Well, what evidence we have so far is we did this on the Anunnaki series. We did a special called Calendar Quarrel. And did you see that one? Where we went all the way back to the beginnings of the calendar and walked forward with it. Well, it's very clear to me, and I've been saying this all along, that the Anunnaki term limits on their Council of 12 was tied to the zodiac. And they've as much told you that by affiliating their names with planets and all the other stuff they did, okay? So in accordance with what I understand is their rank 50 is the Demiurgus commander of the earth. Rank 60 is higher. It's for the top of the council, which is held by the king of Nibiru, which appeared to be Anu at the time when we were looking at the Sumerian documents. But that could have changed over a zodiacal house. So every 2,160 years, if you use the equivalence model of the zodiacal house, there's going to be a change on that council. And what humans see as their reality is going to change significantly. So if you've got an Enlilite in who's aligned with the Demiurgus that wants to see you used as fodder in the mines, and it changes over to an Enkiite that's like about empowering you, giving you an opportunity to go higher on your ascension path, the best you can in this dimension, you're going to see a different version of reality big time. And I think that's happening right now. We just came to the end of the age of, and we entered the age of Aquarius, right? Ending Pisces, entering Aquarius. Well, we're probably partial of 1 degree into the zodiacal house. So how much leeway do you think the Anunnaki clans give each other, either side of the zodiacal house, to clean up the last gig that they had and implement the new one? Right? Maybe it's a whole zodiacal degree, which might be 72 years. I don't know. But I think we're in the 1st degree of Aquarius, and you're seeing the old house getting taken down and the new zodiacal house rulers coming in and taking over. And from what I can tell, the last house of Pisces was completely ruled by Enlil's clan. And by the way, if you go back to the Olympian Council gods, the 12 major gods on the Olympian Council, Zeus was number 1. That was Enlil. And many of the other council members on the Olympian Council were Enlilites as well. They weren't affiliated with Enki. One of the primary ones that was on that council that was affiliated with Enki was Hermes. Okay, this was another incarnation of the Nigshita character who became Mercury, right? So he was kind of a mix between Enki and Enlil in his bloodlines. So that brings up a whole nother dimension to this cosmic battle between these clans. It's not very clear cut. You know, this one was born of this one, so he's on that side. They crossed over, they intermarried, they tried to end feuds by the old way of having this one's daughter marry that king and that kind of stuff. It went on a lot. So I hope that helps clarify some of their complex interactions. And we want, you know, from a right-wing Christian standpoint, we want them all to be the fallen angels. They're the ones that did it to us, and they're all demons. Well, nothing could be further than the truth from that, in my opinion.
Let me jump in on that, because what do you feel we were like before our bodies were tampered with here on this planet? I shouldn't say we, because I don't know if I was here before.
Well, this is sheer speculation.
Who knows?
Beyond the last genetic splicing that happened to us, that most people ought to be focused on that one and understanding that one beyond what happened before, because you're an accumulation of all of them, right? Imagine there have been thousands of avatars on this planet that they keep getting iterated based on the environmental circumstances that are occurring on the Earth at that time. Well, the oxygen is pretty high right now, so we can make them really big, right? And they can irradiate the heat from the surface of their skin easier now because their respiratory gases are the right mix. Well, then that decreases, and now you got to have them shorter, right? I mean, this is what happens with gigantism that we clearly saw many thousands of years, millions of years ago. Well, that changed because the oxygen level on the planet changed. So how far back do we go? The best evidence that I've been able to gather is I can go back about 3.5 million years ago to Australopithecus afarensis. Okay, that was Lucy.
Can you say that again?
Australopithecus afarensis. Okay, that was Lucy that showed up in the museum, even in San Diego. I got to go see her bones. And I was just waking up to the idea of what does evolution really mean? And I was in genetic engineering programs up at UCSD studying, population dynamics and creating, models of the natural selection process. Okay, so it was very much on my mind. kind of my hobby, you might say. So back 3.5 million years ago in South Africa, we found bones, evidence of bipedalism with Lucy. Okay, and there have been many others since then. They found all kinds of pre-hominids, but they mostly had the attributes of Neanderthal and ape. They did not have the attributes of Homo sapiens sapiens until about 220,000 years ago. And we found this out through the genetic Eve and genetic Adam studies that were done by the Smithsonian. I used to work at Cal IT2 at the Atkins Hall at UCSD, where they had the 3D protein lab where you could go through the visualization, all the proteins and all that. Well, the guys that were there were actually the ones that did the genetic study, looking at the mitochondrial DNA decay and also the Y chromosome decay to track back the first Adam and the first Eve. Okay, that was very significant scientific data for me. And they both landed in South Africa about 200,000 years ago. That's when the modern version of us showed up. Well, it just so happened that synced extremely well with the Sumerian account of the Anunnaki being in the Abzu mining gold in South Africa, where we found thousands of mines. Anglo-American Mining Corporation owned many of them when this information first came out. Okay, there were mines in South Africa that were more than 160,000 years old. Explain that. Okay, this is physical, tangible stuff. Okay, and it coincided with what the Anunnaki message was by the Sumerians. They said they had us down, they had people down mining gold in South Africa. Read the Atrahasis account. That's exactly what they said. We were piling up the ore, piling it up for at least a SAR, 3,600 years, minimally. These guys were in those mines, digging gold, okay? There's physical, tangible evidence of that. It's been carbon dated to show that's true. That's hard to walk away from, okay? So now you're in corroboration mode. Well, was what the Sumerians all said, is it all true? Is it all false? Are there any nuggets in there that really stick? That one sticks, okay? And it caused people to go down there and verify this, like my, okay? That's a reality. Then all of a sudden you find all these circular stone houses all over the landscape that supposedly were only 300 years old from the Dinka tribe. Well, that's not true either. They're very ancient structures all over South Africa, surrounding where the gold mines were, okay? So it all starts coming together that what the Sumerians were telling us, some of it might have been true. And now you see that Enki and Enlil, they were very much involved in these mining operations. Enki even talks about on Atlantis mining orichalcum, the only place they could find it. And he was known as he of the copper mines, okay? Enki was an engineer and a scientist who knew about resources all over the planet, all over the galaxy. Okay? So, and you read Battlefield Earth when you compare and contrast these two characters. And anybody who hasn't read the full Decalogy, the 10-book series from L. Ron Hubbard, forget about his Dianetics and all that other crap. He was a science fiction writer way before that. And I think he got turned on to the Sumerian story because he very accurately portrays the Demiurgus commander and the crazy, wild-eyed scientist Enki and how those two interacted through that whole series. It is hilarious, but it's very insightful in understanding what went on between those two in their battle for Earth.
Let me interject on that if I can, because I certainly feel that our history has been tampered with. And I wonder to myself, okay, if we go back 1 million years, 2 million years, were our ancestors more in tune with Mother Nature, with spirit, with source, and able to kind of do astral projection at will, essentially talk to the plants and animals via telepathically, like what is talked about with Michael Mudo Cremo, the guy from Africa that talks about the ancients and stuff like that. And I don't know. And then you kind of look at what you just said is more scientifically approached. I mean, that has more data to it than just imagination and thought process and what people have talked about from generation to generation as passing over stories. So it does make sense, though. I'll bet you there was that give and take, you know, because look at
well, we haven't really genetically changed that much from. Well, now let's go. Let's finish your last question. So go back about 220,000 years ago, where the Adam and Eve mitochondrial.
Sorry about that.
He's a tribal chief or shaman down in Africa, and he's done some interviews. But if you go back to that time period with the genetic study and go, okay, what what bipedal hominids were occupying. This is the claim he could experiment with on to possibly produce a primitive worker like the Atrahasis said. Well, there were several of them. So if you go 400,000 years ago forward, we have now evidence that the Denisovians were found, and they had very much Neanderthal characteristics. Okay, so and we knew the Neanderthal were around at that time, as well as the Cro-Magnon men. Okay, and then there's several others as well, but there were bipedal hominids around, primitive. They had ape-like structures, not human structures, though, that were used for the genetic experiments as described in the Atrahasis. And they didn't try just one; they tried it with various animals, animal combinations, and finally at the end, it looks like they decided to use some of their own DNA because they couldn't get what they wanted. So I truly believe that it's probably Neanderthal. I'm 90% convinced it was Neanderthal, and possibly 10% Cro-Magnon or some mix, and some mixture of their DNA. We don't know exactly to what extent they clamped their DNA that they gave us, but clearly it was.
What about the Rh negative bloodline? Have you ever looked deep into that?
What's that?
The Rh negative bloodline. Have you been able to?
I looked into it for a while. There have been a lot of claims. People are trying to say, "Well, I've got this blood, so I must be from the Anunnaki directly." I think that the claims are all over the board. There's 16% of the populace that looks like they're Rh negative. It's interesting that blood is incompatible with Rh positive blood. I'm not sure why. That's a very unusual thing. It could have something to do with some combination of later genetic mutations trying to make this host more accessible to this avatar host and another host. I don't truly know exactly what they were up to with that.
I'm going to add to that because I've actually got some personal friends that have that specific blood type. They've got the extra vertebrae. They've got some very incredible ties to aristocrats in England. They've got some very fascinating life experiences that I'm not going to get into. And it is absolutely incredible. Their psychic abilities, their intuition, the weird paranormal stuff that tends to revolve around them. Plus, some of them have the elongated skulls, not as intense as you would see about with Akhenaten, but elongated skulls also. It's just very fascinating.
Well, there's so many strange, I don't know, cryptozoological issues going on with humans. I mean, look at all the kids in China that were able to do absolutely fantastic, crazy mental feats, like reading up a wadded piece of paper they put in their arm, and just bizarre things, and thousands of them, not just one.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with are we getting augmented real time with these upgrades that are showing up in the populace? Probably. So, are you ready for your upgrade, Ozzy?
Oh yeah, big time. Beam me up, man. I'll tell you, I'm ready to go on a cruise on the Cosmos Silver Surfer style. I like the DNA meta packet kind of theory. When you look at DNA, it breaks down into a quad code. And certainly if you look at this construct that we reside in, it does seem very simulation aspect, but that doesn't mean it's not real. I feel that even once we wake up or go to the next side, essentially from this specific meat host, does that mean that now we're in a facility that we don't have holographic reality anymore? It's all physical matter, so you can't look at a physical piece underneath the microscope and see there's hollow there. I mean, there's too many questions.
I think it's just the opposite. I think you go back when you lose the meat anchor, as Thoth describes, your true essence is light. So light has the unique properties that it's the most unmanifested energy that can turn into anything else. So if you want it, so think of it from that standpoint. If you go, I want to be Ozzy Stern riding a horse Pegasus on Mars while I deliver this message, you can do that. Okay, that's the process of quantum encryption encoding light into material form that we talk about with learning. Okay, this is what came out of the Masters of the Far East. It's a scientific understanding of how the creator of all creates matter. And when you get that, you start to see the entire constructs of the holographic universe and how you fit into it. Because you are nothing more than a creation of matter from light, like everything else. Energy and matter just change form, okay? Back and forth, back and forth. And the matter part of it is the illusory part of it, because eventually it's going to deteriorate and turn back into its essence, which is energy.
You know, that's a good point. That makes me think of my favorite superhero, Dr. Manhattan.
Really?
That guy is just awesome. He can, you know, go to Mars. He can stop nuclear wars and be at multiple places at multiple times. And I really appreciated that film because, I mean, it had a ton of Illuminati symbolism in it. It had the Rockefeller Institute at the very beginning, but they were dropping gem after gem after gem of some very occult knowledge. When I say occult, I just mean hidden. Now, that specific film, Watchers, one of my favorites of all time, it had just so much involved in it. And I could so relate with Dr. Manhattan when he was going through that mindset of like, why do I care for these humans anymore? Because they're just killing themselves and they're so primitive in thought. You know, he's out there contemplating all that stuff on Mars, and then that, you know, his girlfriend's like, hey, snap out of it. You know, you got to help us out. We're human. We fight, we live, we make mistakes. And he kind of realizes that and goes back to his senses and helps out the humans. But it's unbelievable the different mindsets that we can really achieve if we just break out of these just silly dualistic paradigms. Sometimes we tend to be our enemy, you know?
Yeah. You know, for some reason, you jarred a memory of mine relative to the story from the Bible where they're going to try to rescue Lot from the city of Sodom, right? He's gone there and he's being held captive, and God sends two of his angels to go see if there are any righteous people in the city before he destroys it, right? This is Enlil, by the way, and he's talking to none other than his son, Ninurta, while this is going on. Okay, and Abram is along for the ride, so Abram is talking to him as well, and he's like, well, what if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you nuke it then? And it's funny, he uses his symbol number of his rank when he poses this question to him. He goes, wow, now if you find 50, I won't destroy it. Remember this conversation? And he's like playing the logic game with Yahweh, okay? And he's like, well, what if there's only 10? Would you destroy it then? No, show me 10. And then he comes down to go, he's like, because he knows Lot is in the city, okay, with his wife Sarah. And he knows he's going there to get them because he views him as the only righteous one in the city, right? But he's playing this game like this Dr. Manhattan, thinking on Mars like, oh, all the humans are bad, I'm just going to destroy them all. And then somebody comes along and goes, well, what if there's just one that's good? Would you help that one? Like that, right? Freaking bizarre perspective to think that happened. So, but yeah, that's how they thought. They thought about us. You know, they created us, and they're like picking us apart. Like, look, they don't do very well in gravity. Look how slumped over they are. Their meat host antennas are never going to connect it. We got them good, right? Just making fun of us a little bit. Yeah, making fun of us a little bit. But they created us. It's like making fun of your I, Frankenstein, right? Look, he keeps losing his temper over here. We're going to have to look at that parameter in the program. Maybe we can fix it. I don't know. It's kind of entertaining. Let it go. I don't know. You know, just, well, what is it about us humans that entertain the shit out of them that they let us run free reign like this?
It's our consciousness. It's our spirit. It's our essence. Because they might have created or helped create our physical meat suits here, but they certainly didn't create us. And
no. Well, this is where it gets a little crazy, okay? When you go back to the Atrahasis, Enki's talking about doing this ritual where he creates his first Adamu, right? The atom.
Just like in the Nag Hammadi secret book.
Oh my God, it is just crazy. And you know, and he's like, well, I'm going to do this washing on the 7th and the 15th, and then we're going to offer up this Ajiji over here, and he even names who it is. We're going to kill him, take his spirit out of him, put it into that one, and then you'll hear his heartbeat drum forever, and he'll have our mark. That's what it says. Well, that's crazy, dude.
That's the carbon atom: 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons.
That is a Frankenstein moment. Okay, I bring this up on radio, and people can't seem to grasp this.
Did you get what I asked on that?
Energy out of this one and stick it in that one. What kind of entity are you?
That, you know, and that's talked about in the Secret Book of John as well. Yaldabaoth, essentially, they try and go after Eve. They try and go after Adam, because once he breathes his air, his life into Adam, he realizes that he made a mistake, and now Adam has
that's all a lie. You read the Bible, the same thing that goes along with it.
Exactly.
Enlil makes the claim that I created the humans. He didn't have a damn thing to do with it. He was on the council that agreed to let it happen. Okay, but he was really upset about it.
You know,
not like the fact that his brother's genetics were being used to create a primitive workforce that could rival his command.
What you're telling me is when you read these books of antiquity, and it's very symbolic, and if you put it together the way that we're doing it right now, it just seems to me that this makes a lot more sense logically, so people can take faith and actually connect it with science and information and speculation and conspiracy and critical thinking. It's all intertwining here.
We didn't finish that part. That's really important, okay, when you're talking about faith, okay? The reality is, my research and many others, if you'll dig in, there were Anunnaki beings who were aligned with light forces that were trying to help you out of your primitive enslaved trap that you were born into. And Thoth was one of the key ones that did that, made a deal with higher forces in the Poimander, if you want to take the time to go read it. It's in Manly P. Hall's book, Secret Teachings of All Ages. He made a deal with a very high level entity, I truly believe it was the creator of all, to teach the mysteries on this planet to the humans, to get them out of their enslavement, to allow them to participate in this evolution of consciousness that he was all about. That's what the caduceus represents. It's an alchemical symbol that represents the transformation of energy into a higher state where you have wings of Hermes, okay? That was his job, to wake you up. And he definitely has opposition all through the ages, okay? But his knowledge has always been there, okay? So I don't know how I got back off into that.
Well, that was good.
But that very being, guess what? When you look into the record, that very being was known as many avatar names. He was known as Buddha, known as Jesus, known as Hermes, known as Ningshita, known as Mercury, and Melchizedek, and many other names. Okay, Melchizedek was the king of the city of Salem, which was in northern Israel before Enlil sent in Abram to destroy it through genocide. Look it up. He had a fortress there called Zion. Okay, you think there's not a connection to Zionism and the war between Yahweh and Ningshita Thoth, Jesus, to wake us up? The Demiurgus' mission was to keep you dumbed down, stupid as a slave. Whereas Jesus' mission was to wake you up to the kingdom within. That's exactly what Thoth teaches in the Emerald Tablets. Read it closely. He teaches you how. They're the one and the same being. So all you that are caught up in the right-wing religion, promoting Jesus, and at the same time in your, I don't know, entertainment sequence, saying the word Yahweh, you are ruining what you're doing. They've mixed the two together, truth and a lie, and you're swallowing the lie. Get rid of the Yahweh and glom to the Jesus, and you got it right. And then find out what his other names were and what his other roles were, and all through culture as his agent to wake humans up, to allow you to have the fullest experience that he designed you to have. He was a geneticist. He put his mark on you. Don't forget that. Read the Atrahasis. He's in there.
Who's Ra?
Ra is Marduk. That was Enki's first son, born of his wife Damkina and himself. Look at your genealogy table.
December 25th. December 25th, and the connection to Ra. Can we go there? Because Christmas is...
Well, actually, it's not so much... Well, there's a whole idea of them wanting to affiliate with different planets, okay? Enki was affiliated with Neptune. Enlil had Jupiter. Mars was Ares in the Greek, okay? So they each have their own planets. The one that chose the sun, they were very much in competition for it. For the sun and Venus, the two that seemed to come up the most, they were in competition. Saturn belonged to Anu. There was no competition over that. That was his, okay? Now, when it came to the sun, though, you had original solar deities that were affiliating with them, and the whole ritual had to do with the solstice event, okay? Where you reach winter solstice, 3 days later, the sun turns around and starts going back the other way. So you have this dying, rising ritual It was all through the alchemical principles relative to the sun, which they viewed as the source of light. Okay. So later on in time in Rome, once Enlil's clan overtook many of the religions and started the Empire of Rome, okay, underneath that, they had a holiday that they used to aggregate the pagans that were following old traditions from Thoth, and they aggregated them under Christian traditions, which was Christmas, around December 25th. Well, the old tradition was from December 21st to the December 23rd, you had 3 days where it reached the solstice, reached the zenith of the, Tropic of Capricorn is in the north and the Cancer is in the south, right? So that's where the sun reaches the furthest most zenith in the south is during the winter solstice. So that'd be the Tropic of Capricorn. Cancer, I'm sorry. Okay, so that's when it's really cold for us. Well, this little period that they had been venerating deities that were affiliated with the sun, that was no good for Constantine. He needed to subsume that under the Christian dogma, which would now have been taken over by the Romans. Okay, so the whole Christian consummation by Constantine completely wiped out the connection to Thoth and Jesus and made him this sacrificial thing. You know, all the idea of sacrifice that came up, this was to get you tied in with these lower dimensional beings so that you were on board with all the events they put on the calendar, which are still there today. Holiday of Saturnia was their Christmas, right? So Saturnia was a veneration of Kronos, who was Anu, but it was conducted in the presence of Apollo. So Apollo was Ninurta, Enlil's son, and he was very much involved with Rome. So there's a deep connection with Apollo wanting to be the sun god in competition with Enki's son Marduk, who also wanted to be Amun-Ra, the sun god in Egypt. Okay, so there's overlap and confusion over which one was the solar deity, but they both were vying for it, and many of them fought over the symbology of a particular planet for their symbol. And two of the ones that come to mind the most for me are Ninmah and Inanna. That's Isis and Hathor. Both fought to have Venus as their symbol. And they did namesake subjugation and the whole thing to try to be the one venerated and affiliated with Venus. So there's a lot of confusion over those two characters because that happened in history. And it even fooled Zechariah Sitchin. Okay.
I got to ask a question now that you brought up Zechariah Sitchin. And this was an email that was sent to me, and this is what this person says about Nibiru. On a passing note, the name Nibiru was what the Babylonians called Jupiter. Ancient Egyptians, Neb was their name for Jupiter. In the Sumerian Enuma Elish, Marduk has 50 names. The 50th was, of course, Nibiru. In electrical terms, 1 joule per second times 60 equals 60 joules per minute times 60 minutes equals 1 watt. 60 times 60, 3600. The orbit of Nibiru is a metaphor for a watt. Zechariah Sitchin was a 33rd degree Mason. They love a good metaphor. What is your...
just stop there, Rex. That's so much babble. I can't even believe that somebody would say such a thing. Where do we start with that?
I mean, I appreciate the theory. You know,
this person adding symbology to stories that are written in black and white. Go read it again. Okay, he's not making metaphors about Jupiter at all. Okay, I have a table of every planet that they named and affiliated in that story in my book.
Okay, great. So let's talk about
Jupiter was not Nibiru. No way, no how.